Horror as a genre is a pretty commonplace form of entertainment, but it is one that always fascinates me. Why would we find something that we find scary or threatening, stimulating or exciting in any way whatsoever? Something in our brains likes that we're experiencing a threat or a threatening situation, but it knows there's no real risk to ourselves. And of course, anything that makes our goofy goblin brain secrete the magic chemical that makes us happy, it's obviously been monetized, and there are now huge industries that exist just for the horror genre. While horror movies will let you sit back and enjoy a safe, threatening situation, horror games place you in control, and that can heighten your anxiety or your emotional response to a threatening situation. This can sometimes be a little hit and miss, but every now and again, a game will absolutely nail the atmosphere and tension required to make something horrifying. The game I want to talk about isn't a horror game. It's not listed in the horror genre, nor does it really have any of the trademarks of a horror game. And yet when I play it, I find it to be one of the most dread-inducing games I've ever played. And for this reason, I think The Long Dark is a horror game. The Long Dark is a survival open-world exploration game that puts you, the survivor of a plane crash, alone and trapped in the frozen expanse of northern Canada. The regions were populated at some point in time, but after the game's fictitious disaster, there are now ghost towns, abandoned cars and homes, empty building sites, and between these pockets of civilization is nothing but vast, open, frozen wilderness. There is only one objective: survive. And the only thing you must survive against is nature. Either the animals that have reclaimed the wilds or the cold itself. You can find things to help: clothes, food, medical supplies, weapons, and equipment easily enough, but these things don't last forever and you can't carry everything. The game uses a really simple mechanic of making you manage only 4 status conditions: your temperature, how tired you are, your hunger and your thirst, and using these it controls your overall health in the game. If your tiredness reaches 0, you'll not be able to move as fast or perform certain actions. If your temperature reaches 0, you'll begin to freeze, and without food or water, you would obviously begin to die. Keeping yourself alive is difficult, as you might not be able to find food or clean drinking water so often, and keeping warm is key, but that means making fires and finding shelter, and the weight of your pack is also taken into account, so you can't just pick up everything you see. You have to find the right balances. As a survival game, it's very well put together, simple to understand, but very effective. But I did say this was a horror game, so where's the horror? Save for the animals that might attack you, there isn't anything else in the game that might want to harm you. But therein actually lies the answer. There is nothing else. You are completely isolated and you are alone. You move through abandoned homes and towns and you know that somebody once must have lived there, but not anymore. There isn't a trace of another person save for a few unfortunate souls that have been claimed by the cold and frozen to death, preserved as a grim reminder of what might happen to you if you give up. The Long Dark instills in me a sense of dread and outright fear when I play it. And yet, there's something about it so beautiful that I just want to keep coming back to it. Despite the game's atmosphere of hopelessness and dread, I can't stop myself playing it. It's like the survival instinct inside me that doesn't want to give up. So let me tell you a little story. I'd been surviving in the game for a couple of days and I collected enough equipment to justify making a base camp. I chose to live out of a house that was by a lake. The house had plenty of firewood nearby, so that was never an issue, but you always need food. Luckily, with the house being right by the lake, every day I could just hike out into a small hut that had a fireplace and a fishing hole and catch some fish, and that system worked pretty well. One day after I'd made my catches, I left the hut and began to head home, except that I actually couldn't see my home. A blizzard had started while I was fishing and I couldn't see the shoreline anymore. I'd only brought enough firewood with me to burn while I was fishing, and if I didn't get back to my house, I was probably going to freeze to death. I knew generally which direction my house was going to be in, so I just pointed my mouse cursor and held W on the keyboard. And if it wasn't for the sound of my own footsteps, I couldn't have told you if I was actually moving or not. The visibility was so low. The temperature was dropping rapidly and it made me doubt my plan. I thought maybe actually I should wait in the hut, maybe hold out for an hour or two and maybe the storm will let up. But as I turned back around I realised the mistake I'd made. The hut was gone, taken by the blizzard. And, now that I'd turned around, I was no longer facing in the right direction for my house. I had no idea where I was anymore. With the temperature plunging fast, there was only really one thing I could do. Point myself in a direction and walk and hopefully find land. Once I found land, I might be able to find my way back to my house, or I might find a shelter and wait out the storm, but it was unlikely that I'd find myself in the right place. There's also the chance that I could have turned myself and be pointing out to sea, and when I walk, I'd eventually drown. I was alone, walking through a blizzard, with absolutely no idea if I was going in the right direction, whether I was going to survive, or whether I'd die in the cold. I was annoyed because I thought I had myself set up. A base camp, firewood, supplies, abundant source of food nearby. It all got taken from me so quickly. Everything I'd gathered couldn't help. I was completely at the mercy of nature. That moment made me think of this game as a horror. Not because of monsters or the threat from the animals, but from something real. Something tangible that can and does happen to real people in this world. Nature can be tranquil and gentle, yes, but at times it can be so raw and powerful and so utterly ruthless. The Long Dark isn't a horror game in any traditional sense, but what it creates, I think, is better. There's a feeling of fear, dread, utter hopelessness, and that's real. It's a more pure form of horror, and that's why I come back to this game. It's simple and beautiful and elegant, and absolutely, completely terrifying. But the game I want to talk about isn't a horror game. Are you kidding me serious?